We start in Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be in Berlin on Wednesday for talks with German Chancellor Merz and video conferences with European leaders, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and US President Donald Trump. The meetings, set for 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. local time, come 2 days before Trump's Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. European capitals and Kyiv fear the talks could lead to territorial concessions to Russia, a step Zelensky rejects, calling instead for a ceasefire as the first stage towards peace. We're now joined by our guest. We move on. Apologies. European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will hold a virtual meeting with US President Donald Trump just 2 days before Trump's planned summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. The talks, hosted by German Chancellor Merz, will also include NATO Secretary Mark Rutte and leaders from France, Italy, Poland, Finland and the European Union. The aim is to present a united position and caution against any deal that might force Ukraine into territorial concessions. Trump has described the Alaska meeting as a listening exercise, but as previously suggested, both Kyiv and Moscow would need to cede land to end the war, a stance rejected by Ukraine and its European allies. Zelensky says territorial issues can be discussed after a ceasefire and with security guarantees, warning that withdrawing from the eastern Donbass region would leave Ukraine vulnerable to further Russian advances. Later in the day, Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance will join a second call with European leaders, followed by a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing to discuss support for Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. We're now joined by our guest, Jonathan Hoffman, who's a former Vice President of the Zionist Federation of the United Kingdom. He joins us live from London. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Given the conflict of interest here, mainly due to territorial possible cession of territory in Russia and Ukraine, what outcomes is President Zelensky hoping to achieve from talks with Chancellor Merz ahead of this Trump and Putin summit, and also, of course, his other European allies?
Good morning. Well, the Europeans hold very few cards on behalf of Ukraine in this dispute. The one card they do hold is they have frozen Russian assets. They have around $260 billion of frozen Russian assets. And it's conceivable that they could use that as a bargaining chip, threatening to withhold those assets from Russia if Russia doesn't give back the land that it's taken from Ukraine and make peace. But that is really secondary to what Donald Trump might negotiate in Helsinki on Friday. I think people are surprised that Trump is going ahead with this meeting. The Russian military has advanced into the Donetsk region, and there's no indication that Putin would be satisfied with the limited gains he's had so far. And Putin really, for Putin, this meeting in Helsinki is really a no-lose meeting. If he insists on prolonging the war, there's really not a lot Donald Trump can do, and Donald Trump would come away looking rather defeated, which that is something he really doesn't want. So I think it's unlikely that we'll get any progress on Friday in Helsinki, except possibly the outcome that both sides remain willing to talk. I think it's unlikely that Zelensky would come out satisfied from this week from Helsinki, and there's even talk that one of the conditions of Russia is that Zelensky should resign or should be made to resign. So it doesn't, in summary, it doesn't look hopeful for Ukraine this week.
Well, obviously there is calls, Jonathan, and pressure from European allies on President Donald Trump to have Zelensky involved in these talks. Going into them, Where do you see Donald Trump lying, given the history, especially during his second term, of relations with the Russian president? Do you see a possible change in stance and maybe a further warming towards the Russian president from the US president?
Well, it's really it's a wait and see. We're not quite sure, number one, why Trump agreed to the meeting in Helsinki, given that any outcome doesn't look particularly good for him. Putin is unlikely to agree to give up territory, which is something that Trump would go for, to give up territory back to Ukraine. They last met in Trump's first term in June 2019. They haven't met since then. And really, there's no indication that Putin is in any way in a conciliatory mood. As I say, Russian troops have made advances into the Donetsk region, and I think it's very unlikely Putin will make concessions. So it's unclear why Trump has agreed to this meeting. I think it's taken his advisors by surprise. It's all being arranged in Helsinki at very short notice. So we remain to see if things have changed. My sense is that nothing has changed, but I would be happy to be proved wrong.
Yes, Jonathan, do stay with us. We have some further updates.